for roughly 40 minutes, and she's willing to take questions from the chat if you put them in. And after 40 minutes, there'll be a Q&A or discussion option for the remainder of the time.
That's right.
So over to you, Avril. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Neil. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation today. And thank you to all of those hardworking people at JALT that have made this, online connection possible. I know it's a really, really big job and we're really grateful. Thank you. So today I'm going to talk, well, a lot really about my research, about me, about my preliminary research as well, and a little bit of history too. And I'm really hoping that we'll have a lot of Q&A and a lot of sort of active discussion. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is to give you a little bit of history. It's not particularly connected to English language teaching, but it's kind of interesting history of Black people in Japan, and you're a captive audience, and my family are just fed up of hearing about this, and I'm just going to tell you. Okay, so I think that Black people in Japan are not as unknown as we were led to believe, or we are led to believe. Probably the most well-known Black person from history is Yasuke, the Black samurai who worked as a retainer for Nobunaga in the 15 and 1600s. He came to Japan in 1579 with Jesuit priests. And apparently, people in Kyoto were just so amazed and so eager to see him that they broke down the door of his residence so they could like storm in and get a look at him and touch him and everything. And that's how he got the attention of Nobunaga and became this amazing samurai. In the 1600s, there was a small Black community on Deshima, which was the Dutch settlement where the traders were allowed to come and to trade. And some of them, yes, were slaves, but some of them were sailors or servants or interpreters or artisans. And they were even allowed to employ Japanese people as servants and slaves until slavery was banned. In those days, all foreigners were weird, whatever phenotype. We were all just Southern barbarians. We're all very, very strange. And it really wasn't until the arrival of Colonel Perry in 1853 that the Japanese started to get an understanding of racial hierarchies, especially in terms of Black and white. But just going back to how, weird all foreigners were, in the early days, Japanese artists had heard that some Caucasian people had blue eyes, but they didn't know which part of the eye was blue. So they often drew the iris as blue rather than the pupil, which I just think is interesting. And this is what he really looked like. So Colonel Perry also got some of his sailors to perform a black and white minstrel show to entertain the Japanese. And this was great. It actually toured the country. But in doing so, the Japanese were introduced to Black people as caricature, as comedy, but also as people with powerful bodies. When Colonel Perry delivered the letter from the American president to the Japanese representatives, he was accompanied by 3 or 4, depending on which accounts you read, Black sailors who were very big and very powerful, because he wanted to show that, Americans were very strong and very, very powerful. He loved the pomp and pageantry of that. But he also, in doing so, he also showed that, yes, these Black sailors are very, very powerful, but the white man was in charge. So we'll jump forward, okay, to, I should say, from that point up until now, you know, images of, you know, Black foreigners and all minorities have been filtered through from the West, and they continue to be so, to do so today. So we jump forward again and we see representations of Black people on Japanese TV, and you guys may be familiar with some of these people, especially if you're around my age. You know, Bob Sapp was the K1 fighter. He's actually a really nice, very quietly spoken, gentle man, but his persona was, you know, the beast. He was strong, he was powerful, he was scary. And then we have Bobby Logan, who is probably the most well-known Black talento on Japanese TV. But his portrayal, especially of Africans, is that he is a little primitive, quite unintelligent. He's always confused and amazed by the modern world. Okay. And even when the media is trying to help, we may find depictions like this. I think perhaps many of you are very aware of the racist video that NHK made to try to explain the racial unrest in the US this year to Japanese children. And in this very short animation, there's this very scary looking big, you know, Black guy, muscles bulging, and his first words are, "We are angry." And in the background, you have all these, you know, angry Black people stamping their feet. The reason they are angry, according to the animation, is that they are poor and dying from corona. And there was no mention of the death of George Floyd or of police brutality at all. But fortunately, a lot of people complained about this, you know, not just from the foreign community or the American ambassador. A lot of Japanese people complained about how racist a depiction this was. You can find it on YouTube if you haven't seen it. It's very interesting. And of course, Western media. Lots of imagery of scary Black men in particular, and very, very poor Africans. But even saying that, you know, as John Russell states here, who is probably the foremost scholar on, you know, Black presence in Japan right now, attitudes towards Black people are not 100% negative or 100% positive, and even within the media. And recently, we see things like this on TV. So this is Fukushima Jun. He's a mixed race talento, and he hosted a segment on the lives of Black people and the lives of mixed Black Japanese people in Japan. And it was actually a really good segment. It was very authentic. It dealt with real issues in a very good way. So that's encouraging. And also, lots and lots and lots of support from the Japanese community for the Black Lives Matter movement. This has had such a good impact that lots of activities are still continuing. So for example, Black Lives Matter Tokai just hosted a movie night and a discussion. So the discussion has started, you know, there is still a lot of support. So even though I am going to talk about a few negative things today, please note that it's not 100% positive and it's not 100% negative, okay? So let me talk about the background to my research. And it really goes back to my master's days. Before I started my master's, I was doing a lesson on stereotypes with some English language majors. And one of the students, one of the female students, had this to say: Blacks are good at singing and dancing, a little wild and lazy, I guess. And so, you know, I probed a little bit more deeply, and asked her why she thought that, because I thought that perhaps she had had some negative interactions with, Black people, but it turned out that the only Black person that she'd ever actually spoken to in real life was me. And I'm glad to say I had nothing to do with this. Okay, don't know where she got this from, but really from the media, actually, she got this from. So as part of my master's, I started to probe more into Japanese attitudes towards Black people. Part of that research was to conduct a survey, and I asked the people who answered the survey to assign characteristics to Black men and to Black women. So the top 5 traits for Black men were musical, athletic, big, scary, and violent. And the top 5 traits for Black females were musical, athletic, big, sexy, and violent. Again, it's hardly surprising considering what they see in the media and from the news. And that sort of led me on many, many years later down the line to my current research. Because despite these negative images in the media, a lot of Black people are coming to Japan and having great experiences and forging relationships and building families like myself. And Black women in particular are making their presence felt within English language teaching. So my focus right now are Black female ELT professionals in Japan, particularly the intersection of race and gender and professional identity development. So I'm just going to give you a brief outline of some of the theoretical frameworks that I'm using. So Black feminist theory, because it's based on lived experience and we are creating new knowledge. Sorry if I go through these a little bit quickly. I'm going to summarize every slide because some of them do have quite a lot of writing on. And intersectionality. And this allows me to analyze the different factors that impact Black women's lives in ELT and their professional identity, because we are not affected by one factor, where all of our lives are affected by different things simultaneously. And communities of practice. This will help me to understand how professional identity is formed within different institutions and how the women's participation in the groups within those institutions, whether it be their faculty or their group of English language teachers or the actual school or university, for example, it will help me to understand what impacts their professional identity and how much they can participate or can't participate. For methodology, I'm using narrative inquiry and data collection, 2 to 3 semi-structured interviews, around 1 to 2 hours long, but it depends on how much people want to talk. And finally, just a quick note on terminology. When I say Black women, I'm looking at women of African descent. In the UK, in my country, Black is used as a political term and of course includes women of Asian descent, but that's just beyond the scope of my research right now. So I'm looking at women of African descent who self-identify as Black. And these women come from all over the world, and it includes biracial people. My research questions are, in what ways have race and gender impacted the professional identity development of Black female English language teachers in Japan? And what additional factors impact Black female English language teachers' professional identity? Now, I should say at this point that I am still in the data collection stage. So what I really want to share to you today are some of the experiences and some of the common themes that are coming up within Black women's experience as it relates to English language teaching. So I'll be sharing the experiences of my current participants, my preliminary participants, and I'll even be throwing in a couple of my own experiences here and there. So my participants right now, and I show you this mainly because I want to show you the many different countries that these women come from. They really are from all over, not just the UK and the US, but Jamaica, the Netherlands, South Africa, etc. And they are different ages, from their 20s up to their 50s. They've been in Japan for different lengths of time, 5 to 7 years. And they've worked or are working in many different contexts. So for example, Lorato went from a JET to a private high school, and Bella from a JET to an English conversation school or a university part-time. So they're changing their context, okay? So reasons for coming to Japan, I think very similar, no matter what your phenotype, no matter what your background, you know, employment opportunities, a chance to travel, have an adventure, maybe an interest in the language or culture, maybe a relationship with a Japanese partner. Some of the women like myself, you know, came for 1 year and ended up staying, you know how that goes. So there's many different reasons for coming to Japan. So the first thing that I want to point out are the different perspectives between racial minorities and racial majorities. And this came up in the preliminary research, not particularly related to English language teaching, but it's important because it affects how they interpret their experiences in the classroom. So what I mean by racial minorities and racial majorities, so your minorities would be people like myself from the UK or from the US or Canada, brought up in environments where they are part of the racial minority. On the other hand, the majorities come from countries like Jamaica, Gambia, Nigeria. So for Danielle, coming to Japan was really the first time for her to see herself as a Black person, to realize that, wow, she was really a majority in this context. And it made her feel kind of negative, actually, like she didn't belong, like she was sort of invisible and had to fight to be seen. Whereas Karen, as an African American, she felt that she was treated quite well, you know, compared to how African Americans are treated in America. And there was also a sense of maybe relief or release that it wasn't just the Black people that would be treated differently, but she saw other foreigners, white foreigners, you know, Asian foreigners also being treated differently. So it wasn't based on the fact that she was Black, but just based on the fact that she was not Japanese. In general, women kind of said that finding employment is relatively easy. However, as Kubota and McKay say, teaching English in Japan is a raced practice, and there is a preference for white native speakers, not just in Japan, but there is that preference, especially in private conversation schools, you know, commercial English, because that image of the English language teacher is almost sold as a product, right? If you don't fit this image, in some situations, it can be hard to actually get a foot in the door, to actually get into the school. So for Bria from Jamaica, she was turned down for a job, but she felt that it just, you know, made her more determined. And she was told that she was turned down for this job because they wanted a white person, because they were selling the product of English. Jane's situation is even worse in some ways. Jane came with a dispatch company, and she became a kindergarten English teacher. So she came with a dispatch company, and the first week she was trained in Tokyo and then came to her location with the company representative. When she got there, she felt that the owners of the kindergarten were really upset that she didn't kind of look like they thought that she would look. She didn't understand it because she didn't speak Japanese very well at that time. A few weeks later, the owner of the kindergarten actually told her, you know, we were expecting a white woman. You were not what we had wanted, but they were very happy that they got her in the end. And even in tertiary education, just trying to pause a little bit, give you time to read. It's a bit like a test, isn't it? So Bella was applying for a part-time university teaching job, and the native speaker, I suppose, man, she presumes that he was a white man, on the phone told her that university didn't really like to hire Black people. And where she says here, I don't find that to be the case now, I do have to agree. And I've been working in university and tertiary education for 15 years now. I've always had a job. But one thing that many of us have come up against is that there are gatekeepers to these jobs. Okay, there are gatekeepers. And these gatekeepers do tend to be white males. And I think this is a situation that many women kind of come up against, no matter what the phenotype, because the males are the gatekeepers to the jobs, and they tend to recruit for the jobs from within their social circles. It's not always a conscious thing to keep women or women of color out of these jobs, but they do tend to recruit from within those circles. And another theme that keeps coming up in the data is that sometimes working in male dominant environments can be kind of difficult because of the competitiveness, especially with the younger males. And then also because of something that I call unfair judgment criteria. And so for this, I'm going to share part of my own experience, which I wrote about in the chapter for our book. Quick plug for the book. Okay, always plugging the book. Foreign Female English Teachers in Japanese Higher Education. If you haven't got it, please get it. Okay, I know a lot of the contributors to this book are here in this talk, so thank you. So unfair judgment criteria, what do I mean by that? I'll tell you what happened. When my children were young, I worked in a university in the English Center, one of those new global departments that are popping up all over the country. In my yearly evaluation with the department head, he told me that he thought that I was work shy and uncommitted because I always leave work early. And by early, he meant at the end of my contracted work time. So unlike the male colleagues who were either single or had wives at home to look after their children, I would leave early to go and pick up my children from kindergarten so they weren't left on the street and, you know, look after my kids. What made me also think that this might have something to do with race was that I left in the company of my white female Canadian colleague. I used to drive her to the station, but she was never accused of being work shy or uncommitted. So I was really shocked and upset by this. And I had to go and ask my immediate boss, the head teacher, am I work shy or uncommitted? And he said, no, of course not. But according to the department head, because he didn't see me there after hours, I wasn't a good worker. So I needed to keep this job. So I did this. I put on my mask of behavioral conformity. And what Collins means by that is when you try to fit in with the rest of the group, in some ways you're hiding yourself. I realized that I would have to become like my male colleagues. I would have to talk over people at meetings. I know that I'm not saying all men are like this. I know that you're not all like this, but I'd have to talk over people at meetings. I would have to start boasting about how much work I was doing outside of those contracted hours, how many times I got up at 4:30 in the morning to mark papers. I stopped talking about my children at work because I realized that as a female, when I talked about my children, I was seen as an unsuitable teacher. When the males talked about their children, they were seen as great parents. So I actually stopped talking about my kids. And I just put my head down and worked, and I became someone else. But there was a personal cost to this, and I would not advise anyone to ever do this. There was a personal cost. I was not being authentic. I lost a part of myself, and I was very stressed all of the time. And in fact, I didn't really realize how stressed I was until I left. But I do realize that it was the intersection of my race and my gender, and the fact that I was a mother and had to do things differently or work in a different way to the male colleagues, that sort of alienated me in that department. The next year, my boss, the head of the department, gave me a glowing evaluation, but I lost part of myself. I wouldn't do that again. So another thing that came up, has been coming up in the data, are ideas of what a native speaker is and what that looks like. Let me share Rose's story. Rose is an ALT for a dispatch company at a high school. She's very loved by the students and the teachers there. In fact, she's the ALT that stayed there the longest. But according to some of her colleagues, she wasn't quite the real deal when it came to English. Even though English is the official language in Jamaica, the education system, the legal system, it's the only official language in Jamaica. She felt that people didn't see her as a real native speaker because of her Jamaican nationality. For Kerry from the Netherlands, she felt that people would doubt, and still do tend to doubt, what she says, especially as it relates to sort of a grammar point or vocabulary, because she's from the Netherlands and not a native speaker. And she was told in a NUSHI, I'm losing my English, entrance exam, thank you, an entrance exam meeting, that, her opinion was not important, and that they would go and ask, the white male from England because he was the real deal. And not only that, she feels that it affects how the students see her and whether or not they want to be in her class, because she doesn't look like, she is not a native speaker, first of all, and she doesn't kind of look like a native speaker in their eyes. But what's so interesting about Kerry is that she speaks 7 languages, including English and Japanese. If I spoke 7 languages, I would have that on my t-shirt and start every sentence with, I speak 7 languages. Isn't it cold today? Okay, I would. So in some ways, she's a better language model, okay, than those of us who were raised monolingually in some ways. So moving on to relationships with students. A number of the participants feel that their racial background and their gender identity helps them create closer interpersonal relationships with students. And we do know that women do tend to do a lot more pastoral work anyway. with the students. They do tend to come to us. But Kate, oh, I haven't shown you the slide. Sorry, hold on. Create more interpersonal relationships. But Kate felt that, I should say that she used to work at a private high school, an international private high school that was bilingual. Students would spend half of the day learning in Japanese and half the day learning in English. But she felt that a lot of students would come and seek her out after classes to talk to her about their problems and their issues because she was different. And then they felt different, that they would seek her out. So she became a sort of advocate for those students that, that felt othered. And not necessarily because of race either, but it could be that their parents were divorced or they had economic hardships. And this trait is recognized sometimes not only by the students, but by other colleagues that the women worked with. So Bella, for example, talks about how a colleague of hers was very adamant that she get the job. When she was applying for the job, he really wanted her to have the job because the girls, it was a girls' university, the girls kind of gravitated towards her. And he recognized that there was something about her, and perhaps it was her racial difference, and perhaps it was because she was a woman. Another theme that has come up in the research, and I find this to be true in my own teaching as well, is that, you know, as a woman of color, it is sometimes easier to talk about, you know, those topics that might be taboo or difficult for some teachers to approach, like discrimination, alienation, prejudice, or stereotypes. And it can be particularly difficult to bring up those topics as it relates to Japanese society. So here is an example of something that I use in my class to explain the difference between conscious and unconscious racism. And again, I always talk about the empty seat. I mentioned this yesterday, right? I always talk about the empty seat because the gaijin seat is something that students have seen. They may not have been aware of it, but they have seen it and they can do something about it. I also like to use the "but we're speaking Japanese" video, which is funny, but then I always ask students, but what is the serious side to this? You know, what is the serious side? And I will talk about how sometimes it's been difficult. It can be difficult if you're going to the doctor or taking your children to the doctor and they don't want to talk to you in Japanese when your Japanese might be better than the English. Okay. Some of the women have felt that the experiences they've had in the classroom or within their institution is an opportunity for them to alter their students' negative stereotypes, even when they weren't trying to do so. So I'd like to share an example with you. Goodness, look at the time. So this is Khadija. At this point, she had been working in a small English language school for about 3 years. She was very well liked, very popular with the students. You know, she's a very kind of bubbly, really nice young girl. When this conversation took place, she had sat down with a small group of students, a woman, 2 women and 2 men, just 4 students. And I'm going to read this to you. So I'm sitting down and folks are talking to me about their travel experience about 45 minutes ago. And this Japanese lady says she really enjoyed Los Angeles because she stayed there for a month. Her, she's 34 years old. I stayed there for 1 month. Me, oh, okay, nice. What did you do? Her, I did a lot and I made a lot of friends from all over. Me, that's nice. her. But my host mother said it's a lot of native African Americans near, so maybe I should stay away because they are very dangerous people. So when I heard the police in my neighborhood, she said, the native African Americans are doing something. Wow, Khadijah, I was so scared of them. I was thinking, oh, don't kill me. No, no, don't talk to me. Everyone nodding and agreeing. So. Me, are you scared now? Blank stares from everyone. Guy, why? What? Me, I'm African American too. You didn't know? Room quiet for 2 minutes. Everyone staring at me, very intrigued and childlike. It seemed they were in awe I was Black, as if I was in a Black costume. Mind you, they know me very well and know I'm from the States. People have no filter with Black people. They say whatever the hell they want. So the skeptics, maybe the realists or the skeptics among us may think, well, they just saw Khadijah as an exception. We like you, but it's the rest that we're afraid of. Or the positive side of me likes to think that this was an opportunity to dispel a negative stereotype. They stated they're afraid of African Americans, yet here is an African American in front of them that they like and they know. And hopefully that started some change. Okay. Another theme that's come up for the women is the importance of support and memberships. And that can be within professional groups like JALT. I always get a lot out of this group, as you know. Maybe SIG membership as well. And it could also be in non-professional groups like the Black Women in Japan group, which I co-founded in 2014. There are over 3,000 members in this group now. I keep thinking every day, where are all these women? There are not 3,000 Black women where I live, but I know they're out there and that's wonderful. And then also another group that I created is the Women's Empowerment Circle, which is personal development for women. It's so important to have these groups because, as Bria says, just knowing that there are more of us here, you know, people that have been here for a long time, it makes the younger generation feel like they can do it too, right? That they are not alone. We are not alone, you know, even during a pandemic. So I am so grateful for this conference. So race and gender, yes, it does affect our lived experiences as ELT professionals, but there are also many other factors that affect professional identity. I don't have time to go through all of them today, but I will talk about some of them, a couple of them. So your nationality, maybe being perceived as a native speaker or not, especially if you come from a country like South Africa or Jamaica. Your marital status also can affect your professional identity. Maybe you are single or married. The working context. Are you in a private high school? Are you in a Kaiwa, in an English conversation school? Are you in a university? All of these things affect us. And also professional development. You know, how much professional development can you do? Do you have the opportunity to do, or are you doing? Okay. But the main two that I want to touch on today, oh goodness, just before I finished, I've gone through this a lot faster than I thought. So the main two that I want to touch on today are our position within our universities or our institutions and the non-Japanese identity. So for example, Kerry works at one of these sort of global English centers where all of the, foreign English teachers are kind of shunted into one side of the university. They're great departments. I work in one of those now, but there does tend to be this idea that, oh, it's sort of separate from the university, and that we're always having to prove that we are working hard, that we are researching, that we're making a difference to the students. For Kate, when she talks about working at the high school, the private international high school, she felt that there wasn't a lot of respect for the English teachers. There was the idea that they are replaceable. If one leaves, another one will come along. And so when she was trying to implement new procedures, new activities for the students, for example, buying books for extensive reading, the administration didn't really see that that was very important and didn't want to give her the money to do those things. So she felt there was kind of a pushback. So in this sense, even more than racial and gender identity, it's about the section or the faculty or the department that you are part of and your identity as it's formed within those departments. So I called this presentation The Changing Face of ELT, but as I started planning this presentation, what I really thought was, it's not really about change, but it was too late to change the title because everything had already been sent, right? It's not really about change. It's more about expansion. We're expanding our ideas of what an English language teacher is in Japan. And I think having all this new diversity within English language teaching now, with teachers coming from Asian countries, from the African continent, as well as those people of different phenotypes from, the UK, the US, or Western countries, this can only benefit the students. But it's also important to recognize the contribution of these teachers and to make them part of the discussion in how we improve and change ELT in Japan. And that is all I have to say today. So I hope you have lots of questions. It's gone a lot faster than I thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Avril.
Thank you.
We have about 15 minutes for a discussion or questions and so on. So please.
Not that long then. Okay.
Go ahead. Anybody?
Or a comment. It doesn't have to be a question. It could be a comment.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Nami.
Hello, Nami.
And I'm based in Nagoya, so we are really close. Yeah. And I'm very interested in the topic that you talked about. I studied a little bit about, sorry, my microphone. So I studied a little bit about intersectionality and community of practice in my master's degree. And I am a language school owner in Nagoya, and I'm also an English teacher at university. And before I became a university teacher, I was working at a private language school, major one, ECC.
I used to work there.
Really? Well, okay. And it's not really about African women, but it was what I'm interested in is about Japanese teacher who is marginalized in English language school, because I was one and my pay was much lower than that of what native what so-called native speakers made. So I felt really strongly about the problem there. But now I'm a language school owner, and it's my problem right now to hire what kind of teacher at my school. And I would really love to hire teachers from different background, but at the same time, students really want to be taught by white native speakers. So that's a kind of dilemma that I'm having right now. And I don't have the solution, but I try to be as ethical and as just as possible. So that's it. It's not really a question, but I just wanted to share my story.
Thank you. I think in my experience, because I've also worked, for a long time at ECC, and it is true that students do have this, they do want a native speaker, what their idea of a native speaker is, until they get a good teacher
Mm-hmm.
does not suit that image.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not being big-headed, but my students loved me. And when I was working at ECC, I did have students that said, I don't want a teacher like that.
Yeah.
A teacher like that. And my school manager was very supportive. And she said, just take her lesson. If you don't want her,
Mm-hmm.
then you don't have to have her. And they took my lesson, and, they signed up for a year. So I think, I do understand it must be very difficult, because you do have to think about that balance. And of course, it's a business, right? But at the same time, you're also in this amazing position to not perpetuate the idea, that ideal. So you've actually got a lot of power to change this as a school owner. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I just,
Melody.
that's really interesting, Nami. And I'm thinking, because I think about this, this is also an issue at every level, at the university level as well, in the university promotional pamphlets and so on. There's my face here and there, but no text to go with it. I'm just to show that we are international. So yes, it's a very various levels. But the thing I wanted to say, Nami, was that if you're going to be marketing to the parents, I think, probably, marketing the professionalism, that could be your strategy. We hire professionals, and then displaying the credentials of your teachers.
Yes.
And
Yes.
instead of the picture at the top, the picture at the bottom.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just 1 week ago, a parent came and she said, I want my students to be taught by a native English speakers. And by that, I don't, by that, she thinks that it's better because then her children can learn real English, which means she's talking about pronunciation. So she's talking about accents and stuff. But she thinks that, American or British accent is the best. And that's what people think in Japan or in many countries.
Yes.
So that's one issue. It's not really only about how people look, but how their accent is.
Right. Right.
She may change her mind if she heard accents from, like Newcastle.
Exactly, that was my point. Yeah, sorry.
You're right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
Will, sorry, go ahead.
Would it be okay to sort of jump in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very good point, and about the accents, and maybe people kind of get confused between accents and, let's call it, intelligibility. If you speak clearly enough, and that maybe is the, you know, really when it comes down to it, the make or break of what people are desiring in terms of, I want to be able to speak English. I want to be able to speak English so that people understand me. And the issue in Japan, very critically, is that katakana pronunciation is not intelligible, basically, to people outside of Japan. People who've been in Japan for a while, you know, kind of get used to it, and you know, we can work with it. So it's not just about native speaker. It's not just about native, as in, you know, you're born with that, you're born and brought up in that system. You know, whether you're in the UK or you're in America or you're in Jamaica, I think it's how easy you are to, how easily understood you are, for one element. And your point about, people from regional parts of the UK can be very difficult to understand. You know, we don't understand each other in the UK as well.
Especially if it was
and the other point I wanted to make about the native speaker thing was, often native speakers have an unconscious knowledge of their language, and it's intuitive that they've been brought up with, and they don't necessarily know specifically explicitly what it is that they you know, how to make a call on something, the question that they're asked. And often non-native speakers who have studied that stuff and have a conscious knowledge of it and have an explicit knowledge can answer more clearly. And again, on the same topic of phonics and phonetics, a lot of native speakers cannot read the international phonetic alphabet. They don't know how to explain pronunciation explicitly to second language learners. And that can be an issue. That can be an issue as well. So those are two things to consider there as well.
Thank you, Will. Thank you. Okay, I think, did Jen have a comment? Did you have a comment, Jen?
Oh, I'll make it quick. I was just gonna suggest that maybe getting people in positions of authority and power to back your school might help. For example, you could invite Avril to give a talk at your school for the parents, or someone else who, you know, that you think people would be like, oh, that person's a university professor. Oh, well, if they think that, because although I disagree with like how power works in that way, but if you can use it to like to encourage a just cause, perhaps that can help to change minds. I don't disagree with you, like Avril coming, of course. It's just that the power dynamics suck. Yeah.
Great. That's a great idea, actually, Jen. Yeah, I'd be very happy to come. Yeah. Talk to your parents. Okay, thank you.
I see Maria B has a question.
Oh, where is Maria?
Where's Maria?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm going to ask very quickly before my dogs start barking. Okay. You mentioned earlier in your talk, when you were talking about your initial performance review and the feedback that you received, and then you said that you changed up and you started to wear the mask, and then it took a personal toll on you. My question is, after you left that particular context and you went to another, how did you have to go through a process of rebuilding or reshaping your identity? What happened exactly?
Okay, that's a really interesting question. It's not so much that I went through a rebuilding or reshaping process, it's that I realized I just went through this, okay, this is me process, and I'm going to let everybody see that this is me. I cannot pretend to be something that I am not. And I had to become comfortable, of course, being a professional in that environment, but I had to become comfortable with just being myself and interacting as myself. And I'm a very, what am I to say, very nice person. I mean, I'm not a scary person, but at the previous job, I had taken on this sort of kind of macho kind of attitude, especially within meetings, not in the classroom, but just with colleagues. And I felt, no, in my next job, you know what, I'm just going to be me. And if it doesn't work out at this next job, then I will move on to another one. But fortunately, it did work out. It did. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Ellen also put a comment in the chat saying she would like to ask a question about fiction. Ellen, would you like to discuss that?
Well, there just seems to have been a lot of very good stuff. I don't know, I suddenly kind of found Bernardine Evaristo, and I probably can't name other names apart from that and Angie Thomas, but, and then I'm worried about cultural appropriation a little bit.
In what sense? In reading the books or sharing the books?
If I try to teach that, because I'm worried that for me it becomes like I'm still kind of into my own relationship with my own identity things, and so.
I think you brought up a topic. I think a lot of people will feel that, I don't have the right to be talking about these issues, but it's in the same way that gender is not just a female issue. Race is not just a Black issue either. And I think, students in particular, and people need to see that this affects all of us in varying ways, no matter what our phenotype. So if you were to teach about, Bernardine Evaristo's, book, she's brilliant. I would not see that as cultural appropriation. I see that as a very good book choice, actually. Yeah.
I'm listening.
Yeah. I hope that answers your question. It's Thomas.
Can I say something? Or sorry, I don't know if there's a lineup here, but I just wanted to follow up on that point. This is Jennifer. I don't know if Jennifer Fantides. I did a study on white women in ELT in Japan, and I wanted to do a follow-up study on women of color, and I was really concerned about my positionality as a researcher. I was also very concerned about would these women want to share their stories with me? And I was so shocked that I got way more participants from snowballing than I ever did with my white women's research, because they wanted to talk. They didn't care who it was, as long as there was somebody that wanted to listen. And they were very open with me about everything. And that was surprising to me, because I thought, I wonder how it would be if a man came to me and said, I want to study about women in, teaching English in Japan. I think I wouldn't be able to say everything that I wanted to say. But I think that part of it is that I'm a woman as well. And there is that, intersectionality thing. But I was very encouraged by how these women opened up to me and shared their stories with me openly. So
thank you, Jennifer. Please put a link to your research. That'd be really interesting.
I'll send you my chapter.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh wait, I've got your chapter.
Another chapter.
Another chapter. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
On women of color in Japan. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question, and Kathleen Brown asked if she can talk to you, Avril.
Oh, okay. Kathleen, hello.
Hi, Avril. I'm hiding behind my cat picture. Sorry. I just wanted to ask, since you have all of us here, kind of your vision for the future, maybe even the near future, for what you see as future for Black women, Black people in Japan and in education and reaching younger generations. You're a parent yourself, I think, for your kids. And how those of us who are non-Black educators can work to continue to open our students' eyes. So kind of looking towards the future.
Wow, thank you for that
Big
easy
question.
Okay, the future. I think it takes a lot of courage to teach about these subjects, to teach in this way, to be authentic in the classroom, to show yourselves to your students. And Yoshi's done some great presentations on that, to actually, you know, be yourself. So the future, the thing that I tell my students when we're talking about these difficult topics is that they are unpleasant topics. They're not nice, happy ice cream topics. But if we don't talk about them, they're not going to change. We as educators are in this amazingly privileged and powerful position to shape the minds of young people, but not just young people, but the people around us. That is such a privileged position to be in. So I would encourage you, all of you going forward, is to, you know, don't be afraid. If you are, you know, if you have a question like, you know, I'm not sure if I should do this or how I can do this, then reach out and get help. And together we will come up with the solutions. Okay. So that would be my thing. Can I just take, I'm sorry, Neil, I know I've got to go, but Thomas had his hand up for ages and I think it was aching, so he put it down now.
No, it's because we were out of time.
Okay.
I just put it in the chat. I'd like to know what JALT, I'm in the Diversity and Equity Practices Committee, and I'd like to know what can JALT do for Black female language teachers or IBPOC educators in Japan more generally? What can we do better?
I think for JALT, it goes back to the white male gatekeepers, being conscious of that, okay? It's so, and not, you know, it's sort of heteronormative sort of white male departments that we see again and again. And in some university departments, it's like they're just copying the teacher and, you know, sending him out into the classrooms. I think JALT needs to be just aware of that we need more representation and to go out and find those people, because we are here, right? We are here. Not so many of us, but we're here. So that would be what I would encourage JALT to do. Thank you, Thomas, for that question. And thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
Could we all thank Avril for a wonderful presentation?
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you.
Right, I'll stop recording, and if you'd like to go to the Hangouts, if you want to do that, that's an opportunity to carry on conversations with others.
I am happy to go to the Hangouts, so if you'd like to do that,